Hello, and welcome back. In this video, we are going to see how to host the Pixel streaming application on a public network and share that link to anyone over the internet. This video is a continuation of my previous video about how to run Pixel streaming for multiple users on a local host. Before we begin, if you haven't watched my previous video, please do watch it to understand the concept better. Link is given in the description. Let's get started. First of all, in order for us to host the Pixel streaming application on a public internet, we need to set up a static IP for our network. If you already have one, no problem. Check with your internet service provider to find more about static IP and how to get one. Without a static IP, we will not be able to host the application over the internet. So, if you haven't got one, make sure you have it to continue further in this video. Next, we need to configure the router to enable the DHCP server and address reservation. There is a link given in the description, which explains more about DHCP reservations and its role in allocating IP and MAC addresses of clients connected to a network. For this video, just understand that it is essential to allocate a permanent IP address for the host computer, specifically for our Pixel streaming application. Let's see how we can configure the DHCP address reservation. We need to log into the router configuration URL. Each router manufacturer have their own login URL, username and password, which you can find at the bottom of the router. I am using a TP-Link router, through which I am going to explain how to do this process. Remember, each manufacturer have their own configuration menu. So, it may slightly look different from what you see here in this video. However, the concept of configuring the DHCP address reservation is the same for all the routers. Before adding an address reservation, make sure to note down the host computer's local IP address. This is the computer from which we are hosting the Pixel streaming application. Click on the Ethernet icon at the right bottom corner, select the network that you are in. Under Properties, note down the IPv4 address. This is the host computer's local IP address. Now, head down to the router config page. After logging into your router, go to Network, Advanced tab and click on the DHCP server menu, or click on the appropriate menu that mentions about DHCP server. Make sure the DHCP server is enabled. I am going to add a new address reservation here. Under Address Reservation, click on the plus icon. There appears a scan button for MAC address. Click Scan. You will find the host computer's local IP address here. Select that IP address. Check Enable this entry and click Save. We have successfully added a DHCP address reservation for our host computer. After that, we need to open a few ports. We already have two signaling servers that can individually connect to its own application instances. Each signaling server is configured with a unique port number. We need to add both of them here. Even though we have two unique port numbers for each instance, both of them are configured to connect through a matchmaking server, which has the port number as 90. We need to add that as well. This may look a little confusing now. I will explain it a little later, after we open these ports. In the router config page, look for the port forwarding or NAT forwarding menu. Select Virtual Servers. On the right side, click on the plus icon and click on the View Existing Services button. You will see a list of available services. Choose HTTP from that list. Enter the port number of instance 1 here in the external port value. For the internal IP, enter the IP address that we noted from the local computer network properties. Type the same port number for the internal port as well. For protocol, select All. Check the Enable this entry checkbox and click on Save button. Repeat the same process for signaling server 2 and matchmaking server port numbers. Save all of them. And that's it. You have all set to go on the router configuration setup. Before we move on to configuring the Pixel streaming files, let me explain what we actually have done so far. This is Sam. He wants to go to a friend's house. Unfortunately, he only remembered the city name, where his friend lives. He took a flight and reached there. But, this is not enough to reach his friend's house, right? After trying so hard, he remembered the street name. He took a ride and reached the street. There are a lot of houses in that street, and Sam is not sure which house his friend lives in. Now, he remembered the door number, and finally he reached his friend's house. This is exactly what is happening in our scenario. Sam is the user. City is the public IP address of your network. Street is the device's IP address from which we host the Pixel streaming application. And finally, the door number is the port number that we opened in the router. DHCP address reservation is important to notify the incoming connection about the device that is used for hosting the application. The port numbers redirect the incoming connection to the application itself. We may run multiple other applications hosted on our computer, but port numbers differentiate those hosted applications. So, always remember to put different port numbers for different hosted applications. Let's move on to make some changes in our existing Windows build that we used for the previous video. If you still haven't watched my previous video, check out the link in the description. Open the Windows folder in Visual Studio Code. We already have the necessary files to run the Pixel streaming application in localhost. We are going to do a few changes in those files to make it work over the internet. First of all, head down to the config.json file in the signaling web server folder. Change the public IP value from localhost to your local computer IP address. Keep them within double quotes. Save the file. Now, go to Run Instance 1 batch file and change the Pixel streaming IP to the local computer IP address. Change the same for Instance 2 batch file as well. For running the signaling servers locally, we used run local.batch file. We cannot use this anymore to run the application over the web. In order to run the application over the web, we need to include stun and turn servers in the signaling servers. Fortunately, Unreal Engine Pixel streaming infrastructure comes with its own signaling server with turn server configuration. We can locate this in the CMD folder under Platform Scripts of Signaling Web Server folder. This is the file we are looking for. Before we start making any changes, take a backup of this file. Now, open the file and add your public static IP here, near the colon, and within the double quotes. Same way, add the public static IP near the turn keyword within the double quotes. Save the file. We have the signaling server file with stun and turn server enabled ready. We need to create a couple of batch file shortcuts for each instance from this file. Go to the root directory and create a new batch file. Rename it as you wish. Make sure you differentiate instance 1 from instance 2 when renaming it. Open the newly created batch file in Visual Studio Code. Since this is a PowerShell file, we need to add additional parameters to run it from a batch file. I have given these parameters in the description. Copy the path of the signaling server with turn PowerShell file and paste that into the batch file instance 1 shortcut, within these single quotes. After that, we need to add launch parameters, at the end of this line, to differentiate both the instances. For that, we are just going to copy the launch parameters from the previous signaling server batch files. Open the Run Signaling Server 1 batch file. Copy these launch parameters and paste them into the new batch file of the signaling server with turn server. Similarly, copy the second instance batch file launch parameters, and paste them into the second instance of signaling server with turn server batch file. Save both the files. We have everything set up and ready. Let's start running the servers one by one. First of all, open the Run Matchmaker server batch file. Wait for it to complete. Next, run the signaling server with turn server instance 1 file. After that, run the instance 1 batch file. This will open the application. Now head down to your browser. Type your public static IP in :90. There you go. You have successfully hosted your Pixel streaming application over the internet. To check the second instance, repeat the same process again with all the second instance files. Awesome! You can see 2 instances running over the web. You can try running it from different devices as well. Hope you have learned something new from this video. Have fun! Cheers!